They abandoned her at the altar, dressed in white. But through her tears, she discovered that true love had been waiting in the most unexpected place. The wedding that never was. The bridal gown of Astrid Thorsdottir gleamed like fresh snow under the autumn sun of Jorvik, but her eyes reflected an unease she couldn't hide behind her forced smile. It was September 15th, 947 A.D., and the entire Norse community had gathered in the small timber church of Sankt Olav to witness her marriage to Erik Haraldsson, son of the wealthiest jarl in the region. The church bells rang joyfully, but in Astrid's heart grew an emptiness that expanded with each passing minute. Erik was 2 hours late to his own wedding. The murmurs in the church grew louder, the glances more uncomfortable, and Father Magnus began showing signs of impatience as he consulted his water clock for the 10th time. Astrid stood before the altar, her trembling hands clutching the bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered that morning from her mother's meadow, when she still believed this would be the happiest day of her life. When finally the sound of hooves approached the church, Astrid felt relief mixed with strange foreboding. Erik entered through the oak doors with determined stride, but something in his expression made the bride's heart sink like a stone in deep water. This was not the face of a man excited to marry, but of someone coming to complete an unpleasant task. "Astrid," Erik said without approaching the altar, his voice echoing through the silent church. "I cannot go through with this. I have decided to marry Sigrid Eriksdottir instead." The words fell like hammer blows upon the sepulchral silence. Sigrid Eriksdottir was the only daughter of the most powerful merchant in the capital, a woman Erik had met barely 2 weeks ago during a trade journey. The entire congregation held its breath. Astrid felt as if the ground was opening beneath her feet. "Forgive me," she murmured, her voice barely audible in the sacred space that suddenly felt profane. "Her dowry is 10 times greater than yours," Erik continued with calculated coldness, as if discussing the price of livestock. "My family needs that economic alliance. You will understand in time." His words were like sharpened knives, cutting not only Astrid's heart, but her dignity, her future, the entire life she had imagined by his side. Father Magnus stepped forward, his face red with indignation. "Erik Haraldsson, this is a desecration. You cannot abandon a decent woman at the altar as if she were a failed business transaction." But Erik was already turning away, his decision made long before stepping foot in the church. "The wedding with Sigrid will be next week in the capital cathedral," he announced without turning to look at Astrid. "I expect everyone to understand that business sometimes requires difficult decisions." And with those words, he left the church, leaving behind a silence that hurt more than any scream. Astrid remained motionless before the altar, her white dress now stained with the first tears that began to fall like rain on silk. The guests didn't know whether to approach or flee from the humiliation that filled every corner of the sacred place. Her mother, Lady Gunhild, covered her face with her hands, murmuring between sobs about the shame this would bring the family. Her father, Jarl Bjorn, clenched his fists with impotent fury. "How will we face the community after this?" Lady Gunhild whispered to her husband. "Our daughter has been rejected publicly. Who will want to marry her now?" The words reached Astrid's ears like poisoned daggers. Instead of receiving comfort in the most painful moment of her life, she heard her own mother worry more about appearances than her shattered heart. The flight into the wilderness. Without saying a word to anyone, Astrid gathered her dress in her hands and ran toward the church's back door. She needed air, space, a place to cry, without the entire world watching her like a circus spectacle. She ran through Jorvik's cobblestone streets, her wedding dress dragging dust and stones, until she reached the forest that bordered the settlement. There, beside a stream that sang sad melodies among the rocks, Astrid finally allowed herself to collapse. She cried for the love she thought she had found, for the public humiliation, for the uncertain future that stretched before her like a desert, without oasis. She cried until no more tears remained, until the sun began to set, painting the sky in colors that cruelly contrasted with the darkness of her soul. What Astrid didn't know was that, from the forest shadows, dark eyes had been watching her with a mixture of compassion and something deeper. Ragnar, a Viking warrior of 30 winters who had lost his wife and son in the border wars, had come to this place seeking medicinal plants when he heard the heart-wrenching sobs that pierced the forest silence like arrows. For hours he remained hidden, not from cowardice, but from respect. He recognized pain when he saw it. He knew what it meant to lose everything one believed would define their future. But when he saw the woman dressed in white trembling from cold in the growing darkness, when he heard her murmur words of desperation, something in his heart moved in ways he had believed dead forever. The first encounter. When he finally approached, Astrid looked up, startled. Through her tears, she saw emerging from among the trees a tall, powerful figure, with skin bronzed by the northern sun and honey-colored hair falling past his shoulders like a golden waterfall. Her first instinct was to flee, for she had heard terrible stories about the wild warriors who inhabited the nearby mountains. But something in this man's eyes calmed her. There was no threat in them, only profound understanding that completely disarmed her. "I haven't come to hurt you," Ragnar said in clear Norwegian, maintaining respectful distance. "But the night grows cold in these mountains, and your dress isn't made to protect you." He extended toward her a wool cloak he carried in his pack. "Take this. You don't have to trust me, but you must protect yourself from the cold." Astrid studied his face in the growing twilight. He was a man of strong but noble features, with scars that spoke of survived battles and eyes that held secrets of profound pain. Despite all the prejudices she had heard, she felt no fear. Perhaps because her own pain was so great, it had left room for everything else. Or perhaps because she recognized in him the same loneliness that consumed her. "Why are you helping me?" Astrid asked, taking the cloak and wrapping herself in its warmth. Ragnar sat on a rock several meters away, demonstrating that he respected her space. "Because I know the sound of a broken heart," he responded with soft voice. "It sounds the same in every language." His words were like medicine for Astrid's wounded soul, who for the first time in hours felt that someone truly understood her pain. "My wife died 3 years ago," Ragnar continued, his gaze lost in the stars beginning to appear. "Also my young son. Raiding Saxons attacked our homestead during the night. Since then, this forest has become my home. Here I can remember without it hurting so much." His brutal honesty created an invisible bridge between two souls drowning in grief. Astrid felt her own pain mixing with this stranger's, who had lost much more than she had. "Today was my wedding day," she murmured, unconsciously touching her stained dress. "My betrothed abandoned me at the altar for a woman richer than I. The entire community witnessed it." The words came out like confession, releasing part of the shame she had been carrying. "And your family?" Ragnar asked gently. "They're more worried about their reputation than my broken heart," Astrid responded with bitterness that surprised even herself. To them, I'm more of a stain on the family name than a daughter who needs comfort. Ragnar nodded with understanding that went beyond words. Sometimes blood families hurt more than enemies. At least with enemies, you know where you stand. He stood slowly, moving with grace that spoke of years living in harmony with nature. I have a cabin an hour's walk from here. It's not luxurious, but it's warm and safe. You can stay until you decide what to do with your life. A new life. The offer took Astrid by surprise. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Because when I lost my family, I would have given anything for someone to offer me refuge without questions. Ragnar responded with devastating simplicity. Because kindness is scarce in this world, and when we find it, we must multiply it. During the following days, Astrid discovered a completely different world from the one she had known. Ragnar's cabin was simple but functional, built from timber and stone, situated in a protected valley with a stream running nearby, and trees providing generous shade. Inside was Spartan but clean, with handmade furniture showing extraordinary craftsmanship. Ragnar had insisted Astrid take the only bedroom while he slept by the hearth in the main room. Each morning she woke to the aroma of fresh herbs and the sound of him working silently so as not to disturb her rest. He prepared simple but nutritious breakfasts with plants and berries from the forest, always asking if there was anything specific she needed. "How do you know so much about natural medicine?" Astrid asked one morning while watching him prepare an infusion to calm her headache. His movements were precise, confident, like someone who had dedicated years to perfecting the art of healing. "My grandmother was a vulva of our clan," Ragnar explained, his hands working automatically with the herbs. "She taught me that plants hold secrets that can heal both body and spirit. After losing my family, spending time healing others helped heal my own soul." Astrid approached to observe his work better. "My grandmother also knew traditional remedies. My mother always said they were superstitions of ignorant old women, but I secretly hoped she would teach me." Her fingers brushed the dried leaves with reverence. "Do you think you could teach me?" Ragnar's eyes lit up for the first time since they had met. "I would love to, but you'll have to teach me about the plants your grandmother knew. We could learn together." That simple proposal marked the beginning of a collaboration that would transform both lives. The growing bond. Afternoons became sessions of mutual learning. Astrid shared the fragmentary knowledge she remembered from her grandmother, while Ragnar taught her techniques to identify, gather, and prepare natural remedies. Their hands sometimes touched while working with plants, creating moments of accidental intimacy that neither knew how to interpret. "Your grandmother was wise," Ragnar commented one afternoon while preparing a salve for wounds. "The remedies you describe are similar to ours, but with variations that make them more effective for certain problems." There was genuine admiration in his voice, as if Astrid had brought valuable treasures to his simple world. Weeks turned into months, and Astrid discovered that life alongside Ragnar had a natural rhythm that healed wounds she didn't even know she had. Each dawn brought new learnings: how to read the weather in birds' flight, how to find water following vegetation's signs, how to prepare nutritious foods with what the forest generously offered. But more important than any practical skill was the peace that began growing in her heart like a plant after long rain. One morning, while gathering willow bark to prepare pain medicine, Astrid stopped abruptly. "Ragnar," she said with slightly trembling voice, "do you ever think about having a family again?" The question had been growing in her heart for days, but she had never found the courage to voice it. Ragnar stopped working and looked at her with intensity that made her tremble. "Every day," he responded with honesty that disarmed her. "But I thought that chapter of my life had ended forever, that after losing Helga and my son, I had no right to seek that happiness again." He paused, studying Astrid's face as if it were a map of unexplored territory. "Why do you ask?" Astrid felt her heart beating so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Because I've been imagining what it would be like to have children with you, how it would be to build something beautiful together." The words came out like confession she had been keeping in the deepest part of her soul. "I know maybe it's madness. We come from the same people, but—" Ragnar approached slowly, as he had done that first night in the forest, giving her opportunity to pull away if she wanted. When he was close enough to touch her face, he murmured, "It's not madness. It's what my heart has been whispering since the day I found you crying by the stream." His fingers traced soft lines over her cheeks. "Astrid, do you know what your name means in the old tongue? It means divine strength. Since you arrived, my world has changed. I've laughed again, planned for the future again, believed that happiness is possible again." He moved closer, his warm breath against her forehead. "Would you be willing to build that new life with me?" Astrid's answer was a kiss that had been waiting for months. Their lips met with hunger for true connection, with thirst for love that transcended past pains. When they separated, both trembled from the intensity of what had just passed between them. "Yes," Astrid whispered against his lips. "I want to build something beautiful with you." The return of the past. Months of happiness transformed Astrid in ways she herself hadn't anticipated. Her skin glowed with radiant health. Her eyes had a light of purpose she had never possessed in her former life, and her heart had expanded to embrace a love that transcended all barriers society had tried to impose. They married according to Viking traditions under the full moon, exchanging promises that were deeper than any formal religious ceremony. Ragnar carved rings from special wood representing eternity, while Astrid wove wedding blankets combining patterns in perfect harmony. Their work with medicinal plants expanded naturally. Combining ancestral knowledge, they created remedies more effective than any individual traditional medicine. Warriors came from distant mountains to treat battle wounds, while Norse settlers made risky journeys seeking cures that city doctors couldn't provide. But that peace was brutally interrupted one October morning when riders appeared on the horizon of their hidden valley. Astrid immediately recognized the approaching figures, raising dust clouds in the valley's crystalline air. Eric Haraldsson rode at the front of the group, his arrogant posture unmistakable even at distance. Several armed men accompanied him, their intentions not difficult to guess. And to Astrid's absolute horror, her own father, Jarl Bjorn, rode beside them with somber expression that boded nothing good. Astrid's heart raced as she watched from her cabin window as her past materialized like nightmare in the midst of her perfect present. Ragnar appeared at her side immediately, his warrior instincts alerting him to approaching danger. His dark eyes quickly assessed the number of intruders, their weapons, their positions, automatically calculating the best defense strategies if the situation escalated toward violence. "Do you know them?" Ragnar asked with controlled voice, though Astrid could detect tension growing in his body like a bowstring preparing to fire. "It's Eric," Astrid murmured, one hand instinctively protecting her slightly swollen belly. "My former betrothed, and my father is with him." The realization of what this meant hit her like a fist to the stomach. Her family had come to reclaim her, and Eric had returned for reasons that surely had nothing to do with true love. The confrontation. Eric dismounted with theatrical arrogance he had perfected during years of believing himself superior to everyone around him. His marriage to Sigrid Eriksdottir had proven a spectacular disaster that destroyed both his finances and social reputation. The woman had proven not only barren, but also mentally unstable, and her family had initiated annulment proceedings threatening to take all investments Eric had made based on that economic alliance. Desperate to save his financial situation and social position, he had returned seeking Astrid with purely calculated intentions. "Astrid Thorsdottir!" Eric shouted from the courtyard before the cabin, his voice loaded with the same contempt he had shown the day he abandoned her at the altar. "I've come to take you back to where you truly belong. This little game has lasted too long." His words cut the morning air like knives, destroying the peace Astrid and Ragnar had carefully built during months. Astrid felt fury she didn't know she possessed, growing in her chest, like fire fed by strong wind. Eric's audacity in calling her life a game, the love she had found, the family she was creating, filled her with indignation that surprised her with its intensity. Ragnar placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Stay here," he murmured, with voice carrying warrior authority accustomed to facing mortal dangers. "I'll handle this." But Astrid shook her head with determination she had learned during her months in the mountains. "No," she responded with firmness that surprised even herself. "This is my battle. It's my past and my family. I must face them." She headed toward the door with natural dignity she had developed far from society's restrictions that had rejected her. The stand. Astrid emerged from the cabin with grace of one who had found her place in the world. One hand rested protectively on her prominent belly. The other firmly held Ragnar's hand in clear demonstration of solidarity and love. Her posture radiated confidence she had never possessed during her years as the Thorsdottir family's submissive daughter. "I don't belong anywhere but here," she declared, with voice that resonated through the entire valley. "This is my home, this is my husband, and this will be where our child is born." Her words fell like declaration of independence that left stunned the men who had come expecting to find a broken woman desperate to return to civilization. Jarl Bjorn stepped forward, dismounting with movements that betrayed both age and contained fury. His face was reddened by shame mixed with anger, and when he saw his daughter's condition, his expression changed to horror he tried to disguise as moral indignation. "Look what you've become!" Jarl Bjorn roared, gesturing toward his daughter with abrupt movements speaking of lost control. "Living like this in these God-forsaken mountains. You've completely dishonored the family name." "I've found true honor," Astrid replied, without retreating a single step, her voice loaded with conviction that had grown during months of authentic life. "I've found love that doesn't depend on money, social position, or others' approval. I've found a man who values me for who I truly am." Her words were like arrows directed straight at Eric's heart, who had ridden there expecting to find a humiliated woman anxious to return to her social class's safety. Instead, he faced someone who had flourished far from society's expectations, someone who had found genuine happiness in the most unexpected place. Eric exchanged a meaning-loaded glance with the armed men accompanying him. He had come prepared to use force if words weren't enough to convince Astrid to return with him. "My marriage to Sigrid Eriksdottir is being annulled," Eric announced, as if it were news that should fill Astrid with eternal gratitude. I'm willing to fulfill my original commitment to you despite the circumstances in which you find yourself." The absolute audacity of his proposal left everyone speechless for several seconds. The idea that Eric believed he could return after publicly humiliating her and expect her to receive his offer as a favor filled her with incredulity that quickly transformed into the most intense fury she had felt in her entire life. Ragnar stepped forward with fluid movements, speaking of years of military training. His imposing presence filled the space between intruders and his wife, and when he spoke, his voice carried warrior authority accustomed to being obeyed without questions. "My wife's only condition is that she is happy, safe, and loved," he declared with calmness more threatening than any shout. "And here she will stay, because this is where she freely chose to build her life and future." The resolution. Before violence could erupt, the sound of hooves echoed from surrounding hills. Warriors appeared from the forest, Ragnar's clan brothers who had been watching and waiting. But more surprisingly, behind them came Norse settlers, entire families Astrid recognized as people she had treated medically during recent months. Old Magnus, whose grandson she had saved from mortal fever, stepped forward carrying an official document. "Jarl Bjorn," he said with respect, but unshakable firmness. "I bring signatures from 31 families testifying about this woman's healing work. We also bring Father Eric's official blessing, who has declared Astrid and Ragnar's marriage valid before God's eyes." Father Eric, an elderly priest with reputation for sainthood among the poor, appeared riding his familiar mule. His eyes shone with wisdom of one who had dedicated decades to serving the needy, regardless of their status. "Eric Haraldsson," he said with voice carrying unquestionable moral authority. "I've come because these good people asked me to testify about Astrid's character. In my 40 years of priesthood, I've never seen purer devotion to serving those in need." He slowly approached Astrid, taking her hands in his with paternal tenderness. "Daughter, you've found your true calling. You've demonstrated that God's love knows no borders. Your work here is sacred." Jarl Bjorn, who had remained silent observing how the situation developed, felt something breaking inside his chest. Seeing his daughter surrounded by so much genuine respect and love, hearing testimonies about the good she had done in the world, forced him to confront the reality of what he had been trying to destroy. "Astrid," Jarl Bjorn murmured with broken voice, "forgive me. I've been so blinded by pride and social conventions that I couldn't see what was before my eyes." He approached with hesitant steps, as if fearing she would reject him after all the pain he had caused. "When you left, I thought I had lost a daughter. But now I see I didn't lose you. You finally found yourself." Astrid felt her heart expanding until it almost burst. "I forgive you, Father," she murmured, embracing him while both cried. "I forgive you, and I love you." Eric, seeing his plan crumble and facing opposition he hadn't anticipated, made one last desperate attempt. But looking around, seeing warriors, settlers, clergy, and even Astrid's father now standing against him, he realized he had already lost. The situation had completely changed. He found himself facing not just a Viking warrior and his wife, but a coalition of communities united by respect for a woman who had touched their lives. Defeated and humiliated, Eirik finally turned his horse and rode away, alone, leaving behind the woman he had thrown away and the life he could have had. The full life. 3 years later, the valley that had been refuge for 2 wounded hearts had transformed into prosperous community, known throughout the region as a place where healing and harmony prevailed. The medicinal clinic Astrid and Ragnar had established had expanded into a healing center attracting patients from hundreds of miles away. Astrid, now mother of two beautiful children carrying traits of Viking heritage, contemplated the sunset from her home's porch while nursing her newborn daughter. Her elder son, 2 years old, played in the medicinal garden they had planted together, speaking fluently in Norwegian with naturalness, symbolizing perfect fusion of their world. Ragnar approached after his day's work at the clinic, carrying gifts grateful patients had brought: fresh fruits, hand-woven blankets, wooden toys for the children. His face glowed with happiness he had believed lost forever after losing his first family. "Do you ever regret it?" Astrid asked, as she had asked hundreds of times, though she knew the answer by heart. "I only regret not finding you sooner," he responded, gently kissing her forehead before sitting beside her. "We built something beautiful here, my love, something that will last generations." In the distance, mountains stood silhouetted against the golden sunset sky, and the wind carried sounds of children playing, families dining together, and prosperous communities where love had triumphed over prejudice. Astrid smiled, knowing her story had begun with abandonment, but had culminated in fulfillment greater than she ever could have dreamed possible. She had been rejected at the altar, humiliated before her community, betrayed by those who should have loved her most. But through that pain, she had found her true path, a love that valued her for who she was, a purpose that gave meaning to her days, and a family built on choice rather than obligation. The wedding dress stained with tears had long ago been transformed into blankets for the poor. The shame had been replaced by pride. The emptiness had been filled with joy beyond measure. And every night, as she lay beside the man who had saved her by offering kindness when the world showed cruelty, Astrid whispered the same prayer of gratitude: "Thank you for the abandonment that led to love. Thank you for the rejection that led to acceptance. Thank you for the ending that became the most beautiful beginning." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating stories, Viking history's greatest figures and events.